Scratches is a 2006 horror point-and-click adventure game developed by Nucleosis, a now-defunct independent studio from Argentina, with Scratches being not only their first game, but the first commercial video game to come out of the country. As someone who isn't really well versed in the topic of adventure games but enjoys them nonetheless, the release date and the style are still indicative of what kind of experience I'm going to have with this one. It's a throwback to the glory days of the genre, developed by fans who put tender love and care into the project. These were my thoughts as I first laid eye on all the screenshots and the first bit of gameplay. Though my childlike innocence and anticipation towards this game wasn't something that many people shared by the looks of it, with IGN giving the game a 7.7 and GameSpot a 3.9, basically mutilating it on the spot. I would only like to highlight this one because I would like to refer back to it later in this video. Spoilers, it's straight up objectively wrong, bitter, and misleading, but that shouldn't bother us when it comes to creating opinions about basically anything, right? Heck, we don't even have them anymore, we just sort of latch onto someone else's and scream it into the face of some poor guy who just wants to listen to Ram Ranch on the subway. For the sake of clarity, I would like to mention that the version I'm going to play is the Director's Cut edition, which was released a year later, adding a short additional chapter to restate but also clarify the game's ending in a way. With that out of the way, let's dive right in. Scratches follows the story of Michael Arthate, an aspiring horror author looking for inspiration in a Victorian-era manor that he acquired through a friend and real estate agent, Jerry Carter. I'm gonna be legit, if this is how well it pays to write a good horror novel, I feel like I made a bad decision in my life concerning my future job. Again, Michael's stay in this fine establishment starts off on the wrong foot though, since there is no running water or electricity, and even his car battery was drained, meaning that he's going to have to spend the night in the dark in a completely new environment. In a house with quite a troubling past, filled with murder and other mysterious events. Yeah, it's basically one of those places where your average horror novelist man would have an orgasm resulting in the rocket-like takeoff of their dicks.
Colonel? You better take a look at this radar.
Scratches reeks of atmosphere. From the first screen to the last, the game builds a special kind of dread and a sense of loneliness that I could almost call apocalyptic. The thick ambience, the lack of environmental noises, and the painting-like stillness of the outside world reinforces this feeling even more. Heck, look at the sky. It's beautiful, but it's also dreamlike in a way. Upon entering the mansion for the first time, the dead silence of the area surrounding Blackwood Manor is abolished by the loud ticking of a grandfather clock, which echoes through the empty house. The building is beautifully decorated with era-appropriate furniture and tapestry. It still feels reserved and tasteful with its mostly small interiors that use space effectively. There are larger rooms, but in most of them I feel like I'm walking through small hallways surrounded by furniture with small nooks and crannies to look at. There's also a noticeable variety in locations, even though the whole story takes place in the house and the property surrounding it. From the basement to the attic, most rooms feel different and colorful. There is a sameness to the attic and kitchen area when it comes to the color palette, but that only makes the locales in the first floor stand out even more. Even the throwaway areas that you enter only once are incredibly detailed, like this bathroom for instance. There is no scene in the game that could be described as ugly, even with the occasional low-res texture. There are lots of small details in the environment that sort of amplify the look. A small bit of light that shines through the downstairs window, for example. Scratches has rooms that just feel incredibly hostile or unnerving to be in. The gallery especially has a haunting quality to it that's juxtaposed by the tribal ambient soundscapes that fill its halls. The music is both beautiful and haunting at the same time. The early pieces establish a mysterious, unknown, but beautiful environment for you to explore, and as the story progresses forward, it shows you its teeth quite effectively. The soundtrack reminds me a lot of Penumbra, with its approach to classical instrumentation and ambient music. But I feel like in the case of Scratches, the classical pieces are more dominant and also more terrifying, since they are used cleverly coupled with well-constructed scares or just generally well-done tension building. My favorite track is probably the one that plays in the basement. I'm unsure what instrument this is, but if I'm being honest, it sounds like the ritualistic torture of a violin. The first time I came down here to check some fuses, I was so anxious I just wanted to turn the game off. Describing all this probably feels kinda unfocused, but I wanted you to understand the components the team used to make the game's atmosphere, story and horror work. The thing about Scratches is that it goes old school when it comes to horror. It's a slow burner, a teller and not exactly a shower, at least early on. Because after day one it starts showing, but I have to say that it's really great at telling too. So good, in fact, that simply through reading accounts of previous residents made me fear for my well-being in a supposedly empty house. The writing is excellent, and the accessibility of the earlier texts have always bugged me, like they were just left there by someone who ran out of his home simply because they were engulfed by a sense of impending doom. Get out of here! Your copyrighted nature scares me. Even its dialogues are well done, though they are not the strongest aspect of the game simply because of how they serve more of a gameplay progression purpose in my opinion. You'll talk about story beads, but these work as hints as to what you're supposed to research or learn about most of the time. Or they just straight up give you something immediately useful. Not much is known about the characters. Michael is too damn eager to stay in a house that's clearly dangerous. Though that's something I thought of as a means to push the player in a way. Like in horror films, where the protagonist enters a place that a sane person would avoid for good. Not much is known about Jerry, other than the fact that he knows Michael well enough. He's someone who urges Michael throughout the story to just fucking dip, dude. He has his own reasons to tell you to do so as well. He is voiced by Jonathan Boakes of Darkling Room and, by the looks of it, Street Sects fame. I picked up on his voice quite fast and I like his delivery a lot since he's convincing in this one. Doing a great job. Also, I love how sarcastic these British folks are.
It's me.
The Ghost Hunter. Any contact with the other world yet?
Actually, I'm not sure.
The story the building has for you is probably the strongest part of the game. Scratches pulls off the uncovering a long-forgotten mystery trope incredibly well with clever pacing, patience, and a story that keeps you in the dark intentionally for a long while. As I said in the beginning, Michael is there looking for inspiration to finish his second book, but after setting your typewriter up, you won't be doing too much writing, because the history of the Blackwood family is just more intriguing, I guess. Michael procrastinated a lot more than I did while making this video, and that is an achievement of shit. I never expected to be outdone in such a way, wow. There is a clear ascension when it comes to tension and atmosphere. The first day brings many problems for Michael, as I mentioned the electricity and water shortage. Adding salt to the injury, scratching sounds can be heard at the night through the walls of the house. Aside from these rather uncomfortable problems, the lingering sense of dread becomes stronger and stronger as you learn a lot more about James Blackwood, the owner of the manor, an engineer, and collector of African artifacts. His hobby, however, received a substantial amount of importance when he discovered a tribe called the Dalmar, whose mischiefs he tells about in his journal in quite a gruesome manner. You see, these guys are not your Anulus or whatever, they are unhinged cannibalistic maniacs who like to destroy things. Blackwood's obsession with the tribe results in a chain of events that lead to the murder of a family member and other questionable acts. Whoa, you thought you can just sneak in there, didn't you? Nah, that ain't gonna work at all. This is spoiler territory and I'm going to tell you about Blackwood's filth and what really is the secret of the house. Skip to this bit if you would like to miss out on them spoils. I know that I haven't said that much, but the less you know about the story the better, if you haven't experienced it just yet. Also, I'm going to talk about the last visit episode in this section as well, which has been added via the Director's Cut edition. Coolio? We're inside. Also, I know that some of you guys have been meaning to ask me something.
Hello?
Hey, this is Timmy Tinsel here. I wanted to let you know that I fucking despise your guts, because you fucking lied to me, you piece of shit. I told you I wanted a space game for your next review. Where's the Star Wars hentai dating simulator review, you fuck? I hate you, dude.
Hi, I was under the impression that we were going to be getting a space game.
I don't want your sandwiches, no.
Clearly that was too difficult, you silly fucking fruit.
What's up, Melon?
Mom.
Can't help but
I don't
noticing
have
we're
a
not in
girlfriend.
space.
Stop
You
it.
said you were gonna be in space, so
Stop.
I'm just a little fucking upset that we're not in space, but I love you, buddy, and I hope
Sorry,
your
but
video's
what the fuck is
great.
this?
I thought we were getting space
Goofy
stuff.
bop.
This isn't space. This is something very different.
Hey, Domino's, yeah, can I get a 4 cheese pizza and 2 cans of Coke, please?
I tried, okay? I couldn't record footage for some reason, but like in the middle of this one, I actually figured out what the problem was, so it's coming. We're going to space in the next one. For real this time. I didn't want to cause trust issues, but I understand that I have responsibilities as a nobody on the internet now, and I will make up for it, I swear. So, it turns out that James Blackwood's interest in the Dalmar might have been deep enough for him to steal an artifact, a ritualistic piece. A mask to be precise, the importance of which lays in its role in the Dalmar's history, who, according to their legends, imprisoned a harmful spirit, basically a god in it, through a ritual that has to be reinforced and performed over and over again. Since it was chilling behind a barred up door in the gallery, you can probably see what kind of problems this can cause. The mask's corruption seemed to be the cause of everything terrible happening around the manor. From the simple things like the death of all the plants in the Blackwood greenhouse, to the terrible occurrences like the death of Blackwood's son Robin. The genius premise of Scratch's story is in fact that the game deceives you purposefully throughout its entirety. Your efforts are focused on the mask, but occasionally you are able to glance at the relationship between James Blackwood and his friend Christopher Milton, who supports him in his crazy endeavors, and also Milton and Mrs. Blackwood's... Oh. These people are having an affair while the man is having an existential nightmare going down. I can still hear some of you asking, what does this have to do with the mask plot? Quite a lot, you beautiful little soul wrapped up in a human skin tortilla. You see, that's the big suggestive plot of the story. You focus on the paranormal aspects throughout all this. There is a notion that the decrepit old Mr. Blackwood is inside the house with you, further reinforced by the fact that one of the bodies is missing from the family mausoleum. Of course you check, you sick human burrito. However, this theory goes down the drain when you find evidence of Blackwood burying his wife on the property after her neck was given a kiss by something sharp. So we have both the bodies now. We also find documents about the ritual that's required to evict the mean-spirited spirit man from the mask, requiring something from a predator and its prey to be mixed with a specific plant and to be applied on the branch of a specific tree. You get all of this without a hitch, don't you worry about that. You put together your amulet or charm or whatever to wave over that wood-ass, loud-mouthed, stupid thing to finally shut it up for good. You can actually hear its influence, almost like it's mocking you. But when you eventually perform the ritual, the silence that comes afterwards is just deafening. It's an incredibly well done moment where you actually succeed at your goal, and as you would take a moment to chill and go downstairs to the hall, something happens. The scratching still persists. Considering that it's in the title of the game, it should be the focal point, right? You only hear it 3 times in the entire game though. But the build up to these sequences is incredible, with the first night serving up the realization that there is something in the basement. Yes, that music is there for a reason. On the second night, followed by the first of 3 scares in the game, 2 happen right after each other. After climbing into the furnace to follow the sound, you basically find a human shape run past the crack on the wall that you've been creeping through. Something human is clearly down there, and at first it seems to be connected to the mask, intentionally through dream sequences that focus on the damn thing. Also, this whole setup. I love how well it works. It does so because it lulls you into believing that the story is actually going to be a paranormal one. It's not, and that's the big galaxy brain moment in Scratches. When I say galaxy brain, I actually mean it. But in reality, Mrs. Blackwood wasn't the only one who died in the manor. The Blackwoods had a young child who passed away extremely early, as you can find out from one of the newspapers in the attic. This young child doesn't play a pivotal role throughout the narrative, but sort of lingers on in the background as you learn more about him. Up until the final few moments of the story, I haven't thought much of him. Then it all clicked. As you venture down to a sealed section of the basement through a hidden tunnel, you come across a room with a sad-looking teddy bear, the head of which was torn open. The realization hit me as I gazed at the remnants of a life broken and destined to go unfulfilled. I glanced at the crack in the wall that I shouldn't have disregarded before. The scratching sounds came from Robin, the Blackwood's son, wandering about in his makeshift prison cell. Finding him is the ultimate twist in a story about the paranormal that was more real than we thought so. It all made sense. Mrs. Blackwood's romance with Christopher Milton and the way they talk to each other about bearing the burden of something they are both responsible for. I was pretty sure that the malformed look of their son is not to be blamed on the mask, and I was right. How can I know for sure? Let's take a look at Last Visit for a second.
A bottle of thalidomide. I remember reading something about that drug.
Thalidomide. The controversy surrounding it in the 50s and the 60s due to how its consumption caused irregularities and deformities in fetuses if a pregnant mother took the medication. It could even result in the death of the baby. In The Last Visit, you actually find a bottle in one of Catherine Blackwood's drawers, which Michael didn't really care for in the original game, but it's the same thing. I don't think I have to tell you where all of this is going, right? Mrs. Blackwood gets pregnant thanks to Milton, and the medication she's taking ends up deforming his unborn son. The baby survives, however, and lives in a way that's really hard to call a normal life. Blackwood chalks it up to the curse of the Dalmar mask and goes insane while Milton is trying to cover up all the evidence, including the murder of Mrs. Blackwood, whose neck has been torn apart the same way as the teddy bear in the hidden basement, possibly when she just wanted to see her malformed son. Her body was buried in the yard of the property and is required to break the mask's curse. But what happened to Michael? He finished his book after leaving and became a prolific writer. Considering that he didn't do jack shit and basically procrastinated throughout the whole job, that's a great outcome. The Last Visit further continues the story years later. You take control of a reporter who tries to investigate what happened at the Blackwood Manor. It is incredibly short, and as I said before, it sort of reintroduces the original ending while kinda pointing you towards the more realistic aspects of the story. It ends with Robin jumping you and Milton as he attempts to see him once again, ending in his demise. After which the Blackwood Manor gets demolished and your reporter character ends up piecing together parts of the story, getting a semi-complete picture. But you, as the player who saw both accounts, will have the full rundown of events. Milton, who was the last person in the house after the death of Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, passed away by the hands of the horrifying beast his son became. I have to say that the janky-looking animations that brought Robin to life didn't take away from my investment at all. There is an uncanny valley to the way he moves and behaves which makes me more than uncomfortable. Though I feel like the ending of Last Visit looks a lot weaker in comparison, probably due to how the scene is more complex. I just wanted to add this here so I won't spoil anything for the others. The sense of discovery in this one is incredible, and I feel like a historian who is rummaging through the remnants of someone's legacy and life which was left to rot somewhere in secret, away from everyone. I cling a lot to stories like that because I just love unsolved mysteries. If I could inject those into my bloodstream, I would probably become high on life for once. My only complaint is that I didn't get to know too much about how Michael ended up finishing that darn book. I'm pretty sure he was rather shaken by the whole "I'm gonna chew on your pretty little neck, buddy" bit, but that's literally the only thing I'm not happy with in terms of the story, like I didn't get answers. Oh, and maybe the fact that how was Blackwood able to steal the mask from the Dalmar who basically murder entire villages with their bare hands? That I would be interested in. Oh, before I forget, there is a secret ending, buckaroos. There is one. Hell yeah, there is one. If you keep on pestering Michael about writing whenever you can, I did it whenever I made progress, and also choose the second dialogue choice when talking to the ex-chief of police on the phone, you'll end up finding a note in your notebook about how Michael is not him anymore and he lost his ability to write. At the end, it isn't going to be a room full of scares and sadness, it's gonna be just sadness. It's gonna be the corpse of James Blackwood, who became insane and murdered both his wife and a friend, and possibly his son as well in the process. What this ending suggests is that nothing could have made those sounds in the basement, meaning that Michael became just as insane as Blackwood did. I don't like how the animation shows the crack on the wall you enter, but when you're inside nothing is there. It's just nitpicking, small budget, I understand. I get that. I consider this ending to be quite clever since how even Bailey, the policeman, hints at the possibility of Michael slipping as a means of foreshadowing it if you choose the right dialogue options. I can totally see someone stumbling on this by accident simply out of desperation to get Michael to finally write something, but it's disconnected from The Last Visit, which clearly shows what is canon and what is not. It's basically a reward and a little tease if you went through the effort of actively trying to help Michael in his original quest on becoming a well-known writer. In this case, he tried so hard and got so far, buddy. You're
back. Conan or Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I'm glad for that, I missed you. As a means to conclude the story segment, I feel like Scratch's story is a well-written and well-paced one with a lot of care and effort put into its structure. Complemented by great presentation, Scratch's, in my opinion, is a beautiful and interesting horror game. But the story is just a portion of what is to come. How is the gameplay? Well, it's in the name of the genre, you dummy, you'll be clicking a lot. You look and move around with your mouse. The basic control scheme seems odd at first because your cursor is centered and moves with a sort of momentum, meaning that it doesn't stop when you do, sometimes even requiring you to compensate for said momentum and pull back. Lower the sensitivity and it's gonna be great. Personally, I like this way of movement more because it feels like actual looking around, having 360 degrees of freedom. The other one has a cursor that you can move freely on the screen and you are required to pan in order to look around. I don't know why, but this felt a lot more limiting, probably because I felt like I'm having a harder time navigating my surroundings. It's just not as intuitive as the previous one. There's also slideshow mode. You can move between screens by clicking in specified locations with the left mouse button. The right mouse button brings up your inventory where you have your trusty notebook and magnifying glass. The first one is there to help you keep organized and to provide you with help, but I never really needed it. I basically forgot all about it while playing. The ladder, on the other hand, is for examining the items in your inventory. I rarely use this one as well. The inventory itself, however, plays a pivotal role in puzzle solving, with the possibility to combine items and use them on specific objects. Scratches is one of those games where you won't have to do any pixel hunting. That is somewhat of a staple in early adventure games, which basically means that it won't require you to scour through every screen for something unnoticeable. Scratches is extremely straightforward about item placement. Some environments tend to be extremely dark and finding items in a dimly lit garage on the bottom of a toolbox can be difficult. So my advice is to turn up the brightness just a bit, okay? The game's puzzles are straightforward and mostly easy to figure out. There are some tricky ones like figuring out the save combination based on some play blocks, which you get no hints for. That was actually one of the most difficult puzzles in the game for me, aside from the mausoleum one. Most of them, however, are telegraphed well and are intuitive. There is even a hint system that provides help when you're stuck and actually pointed out some mistakes I made. If you haven't played any adventure games before, I recommend turning this on. It's not as intrusive, but doesn't leave you in the dark either. I talk out of experience because this was Baby's first adventure game. As I said previously, the phone in the hall plays a pivotal role in the story. Talking to others on the phone sort of functions as a trigger. You can only call someone once you accomplished most of your possible goals, and the calls usually provide more direction, while also adding small bits to the story. Sometimes, however, you can end up doing a lot more progress than the game anticipated, so you will be able to call Jerry again straight after you put the phone down. Sometimes the game tells you about this, sometimes it doesn't. It's important to make sure because calling is usually what makes time go fly by. The game is divided up to 3 days, and as you're making progress, time flies by. If you accomplished everything that day, Michael can go to sleep. Next day comes, rinse and repeat. The gameplay loop itself is captivating enough thanks to the pacing of the story. You're always getting something interesting to kickstart your day, let it be a save combination or a date, whatever. You're sort of dependent on Jerry at first because he has a wealth of information. This makes the phone calls work. And also the fact that you are dependent on these people because they basically help you. One of them even translates a letter for you. I would give Barbara a raise, Michael. I hope you will. Scratches is a beautiful, well-written and rough gem that is an extremely good entry point if you would like to start out on point and clicks. It is clearly a labor of love that came out long after the glory days of adventure games, bringing a dish back from your childhood that you haven't had since. Since the indie boom, the resurgence of many abandoned genres is coming to fruition, and seeing beautiful and well-written point and clicks again is always a heartwarming and comforting feeling. Even though I didn't have a chance to experience them in their glory days, Scratches made it possible for me to dip into the genre. It was great to look back at the game that made me fall in love with the adventure game genre and experiencing it as it was meant to be. A gem that harbors the better qualities of point and clicks, a genre basically left for dead by big corporations telling you that they are not going to sell. I would like to thank you for watching. It means a lot that already so many of you, almost 100 of you, have tagged along with me. I never expected that to happen and I'm thankful. I don't like to be the guy who asks for you to slap that like button and hammer that subscribe button and bell into submission, bucko. And also comment. But shit like that helps the channel, and again, I appreciate it if you happen to do that. Also, I have 2 videos about the Penumbra games. If you care to watch those, I'm gonna be blushing and grinning like a madman out of the sheer joy you guys bring me. Thanks for watching again. Next time is banana spaceship time for real now. Take care.